Welcome to This Explainer. I am absolutely thrilled you're joining us today because we're diving into a really fascinating and, frankly, profoundly important topic. We're going to explore exactly how history gets recorded, how it gets erased, and most importantly, how it can be reclaimed through activism and art. Honestly, it's the kind of lens that completely changes how you view the media you consume every single day. Specifically, we're looking at how the stories of colonized Black women have been historically suppressed, and the incredible ways those exact stories are being resurrected right now.
So, here is our roadmap for today. First, silence in the archive. Second, the Aba Women's War. Third, Margaret Ekpo's resistance. Fourth, disordering the archive. And finally, number 5, the body as archive. Let's just jump right in. I want to start off by posing a really direct question to you. Who gets to write history and who gets erased? We tend to think of historical archives, things like colonial records, government documents, old newsreels, as just neutral, objective facts. But they really aren't. Especially for colonized Black women, these official records almost entirely ignored their voices, their agency, and their resistance.
All right, kicking things off with Section 1. Silence in the archive, the erasure of resistance.
See, colonial archives were designed as tools of governance. They pretty much entirely ignored the actual, complex lives of the people they were documenting. So because the official archive is just so silent on the real experiences of these women, scholars have had to get a little creative. The amazing scholar Saidiya Hartman developed this brilliant concept called critical fabulation. Basically, her idea is that when the official record only gives us this heavily biased fraction of the truth, we have to responsibly and speculatively reimagine the past. We literally have to look at the gaps and the silences in the records to hunt down that hidden resistance and try to imagine what these women might have actually said or done.
Which brings us right into Section 2, the Aba Women's War, Reclaiming 1929.
To move from high-level theory to concrete history, we can actually see the inherent bias of the archive firsthand here. If you look at the British colonial records from 1929, they documented the protests of tens of thousands of Nigerian women as just the actions of frenzied mobs. They completely dismissed them. But the feminist historical reality? It shows this was actually a highly organized collective response to the abrogation of their rights and unjust colonial taxation. The official archive literally attempted to erase their legitimate political demands. And the really crucial point here is how these women actually fought back. They didn't just passively disagree. They used incredibly organized insurgent tactics. We're talking about gathering late at night at the compound of a colonial warrant chief, a tactic known as sitting on a man. They would sing these scurrilous songs detailing all their grievances, bang on huts with yam pestles, and use powerful dance to demand their rights. They literally weaponized their voices and their bodies to combat colonial overreach. It was a massive, highly sophisticated anti-colonial action, completely destroying that whole frenzied mob narrative.
Let's move on to Section 3, Margaret Ekpo's resistance, a pioneer parliamentarian.
Because, that fierce spirit of resistance didn't just magically end in 1929. Following the legacy mapped out here, there's a very direct line connecting the Aba Women's War to later activism. Jump to 1949, following the truly tragic Enugu Colliery massacre, where striking coal miners were shot by colonial police. It was Margaret Ekpo who mobilized women to protest. Her tireless activism and brilliant political organizing eventually culminated in her shattering major gender barriers in 1954 when she was appointed as a chief with a seat in the Eastern House of Chiefs. And remember, that was a space that had historically been a strict male preserve. And here she is. Margaret Ekpo was an absolute powerhouse. She didn't just break political glass ceilings for herself, she empowered thousands of others. She founded the Aba Market Women Association and completely transformed it into a platform to educate women on their rights, fight social exclusion, and demand universal adult suffrage. She proved without a doubt that when women are mobilized, they can fundamentally reshape the entire political landscape of a nation. Now for Section 4, Disordering the Archive, Art as Reckoning. So here's a huge question for us today. How do we resurrect these suppressed stories now, when the original footage and documents were literally created by the colonizers? Well, that's exactly where contemporary British-Nigerian filmmaker Onyeka Igwe comes in. She uses experimental art to challenge these colonial archives. But to fully get Igwe's art, you kind of have to understand the specific systemic problem she's confronting. Back in the day, the British Colonial Film Unit operated under this framework called the specialized technique, created by William Sellers. This was a deeply, deeply racist set of rules that deliberately simplified film grammar, all based on the completely false assumption that African audiences just couldn't understand complex visual language. The very fabric of these moving images was specifically designed to render Black subjects abject and subordinate.
Onyeka Igwe's whole mission actually aligns perfectly with this incredibly powerful quote from Saidiya Hartman. The endeavor is to recover the insurgent ground of these lives, to exhume open rebellion from the case file. Igwe is literally taking the archival footage shot by the British Empire and turning it right back against itself. She's exhuming those hidden rebellions straight from the celluloid.
And how does she actually do that? Through some highly intentional experimental interventions. She'll dramatically slow down the original colonial footage. She literally forces us to stop and pause on still frames. She adds these dynamic digital scrawls and lines right onto the images. These acts of stoppage and pause deliberately disrupt that smooth, forward-moving, linear progress narrative the British Empire was trying to sell. It's a visual rebellion, forcing us as viewers to look closer and finally recognize the humanity that the original filmmakers tried so hard to flatten.
And that brings us to our final part, Section 5, the body as archive, dance as rebellion.
What's so amazing is that Igwe actually finds the ultimate solution to the archive's silence, hiding right there within the footage itself. Even when these colonial ethnographic films tried their hardest to present Black women merely as exotic spectacles, the women themselves subverted it. Their unscripted movements, their dance, their ecstatic communal gestures, it all acted as this alternative archive. Their dancing proved their livingness and their joyful, vibrant resistance against oppressive colonial strictures. It was a form of profound knowledge that the colonizers somehow caught on film, but entirely failed to suppress.
As Igwe beautifully describes it, she is seeking knowledge outside of the purview of cognitive systems that traditional archives entomb. The written records might have lied, but the bodies told the truth. Through these physical gestures, Igwe locates a powerful, undeniable diasporic connection and a deep matrilineal history that easily outlives any official paperwork.
Igwe employs this absolutely fascinating technique where she superimposes text directly over the archival footage, directly asking questions of the women in the films. She asks things like, "What happened when you looked down the lens?" By talking to them directly, she's giving these women back their agency. She transforms them from silent, objectified subjects into active living participants of a speculative counterhistory.
And then she asks them, "Is this okay? Did you want your whole body in shot?" I really want to end on these deeply empathetic, provocative questions, because they force us, the modern viewers, to seriously ponder the ethics of how we consume history. It's a huge reminder that we have an ongoing, profound responsibility to the subjects of our archives. History isn't just a dusty thing that happened in the past, it's somebody we are actively reconstructing right now. So what hidden stories will you look for next? Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and keep learning.